All right, so the first thing that happens is when Alexa comes and makes a post request to the backend service, it comes in here and it routes through an endpoint, the Alexa endpoint. After some verification and loading of some classes in the C# code, comes down here to our post method, and it decides what request type came in, whether it's a user event, an intent request, a launch request. One of the important methods that you need to take note of is the load token list data. So initially, when an intent request comes in to, say, for instance, take a look at a library, it loads the library intent response. And then again, after some more verification code, we start to build things initially like our APLA data sources, and also the document itself. If we need to elicit some more information, we can send out certain or return certain requests back to Amazon to ask the user to fill in some gaps for information that we might need. But down here, what happens is we create a what is a dynamic list data source. So this is actually an important directive that gets sent, data source that gets sent with the request, dynamic token list. So we would send, and that dynamic token list, I call it the dynamic list data source, but it's a dynamic token list, gets sent specifically along with other data sources to start building the grid of items in your APL document. If we look at our APL layouts class over here, what'll happen here is this is just in C# just rendering different layouts. That's going to layouts directives that are for APLA. That gets sent back to Echo Show devices. The one to take a look at here is the render library grid method. It just pretty much does an AlexaGridList, which is a responsive component. The responsive components are sort of just components that have been made, pre-made for you to use. This uses a grid list sequence, but it has some like special attributes to it. So what happens here is I just fill in, if we look at the grid list, actually, let's take a look at that. So here, pretty much it just built a class for the grid list, and it just had all the different properties that was in the documentation, and it just returns the type of grid list. And then I just fill in that data. So I want my grid list to be 100% of the screen and 100 width of the screen, and the amount of items that I want across my grid list, I only want 5, and then I kind of give like an arbitrary magic number here of like 315 pixels for each item, whether or not I want a back button, how I'm going to scale those images, best fill, whatnot. And then here the list items. So this is kind of important. The list items are going to equal the grid list items, which we set back here in the data source. Now what happens is so this will set up an initial list of items, and when we build that data source, let's see, where am I going to build that data source? Up here. I pretty much am setting the items in that data source to a specific I just call them grid list items. That's what the class that I made for them. But really, all I'm doing is I'm setting an image source URL for each item that sends back. There's more to an Alexa grid list item than just the image source, but currently that's all I'm doing. I'm just getting the primary image for a movie, and then all I do is after I query my backend for that like base item data, I put that. I put the URL into the image source, and then I add all of those items that I've mapped back to the library items. I add to the items in a dynamic data source, and then add it in under the grid data items. So the next time, as the user is scrolling through the document, the APL document, new requests start coming back. And these requests are the load token data list. And this happens in the grid, the Alexa grid sequence, the responsive component. And so what happens here is this gets sent to this method load token list data, and it comes down here, and then we go back to our library intent response. Only this time I did a conditional that says, okay, if our request isn't the initial request that set up our initial APL document, which happened here with our data sources and grid list items and whatnot. This time, when it comes back, and if the request type is a load token list data, then we're just going to send back a new set of items that to show the user. I just did a little hack here where I said a correlation token comes back with each subsequent request to update the grid list with new items. So these correlation tokens come in multiples of 100, or they start at 100, and then you get a new correlation token once the request comes in. So our first correlation token comes back as a 101, and then it comes back as 102 each time Alexa wants you to send back new items. This was an easy way to figure out where the start index was going to be for our next database query for images. So all I did was I said that if the correlation token came back as 101, then I know, and I initially sent a limit of 50 items. I've set that up here, just a constant limit of 50 items at a time. Then all I do is I take that correlation token, which comes back as a string in the JSON, and I say, okay, well, if I've sent 50 items, my start index is going to be the next 50 items. So if my correlation token came back as 101, then I kind of figured out that my correlation token minus 100 gives me 1 times my limit, which is 50, plus 1. So I'm not giving back the item at index 50 again and repeating it. I'm doing actually 51, and this just happens as it goes through again and again. I hope I'm explaining this all right. And then I set up the new query items list and do the same thing again. I get the primary image URL, add it to that image source, and then I send back this. My render document directive manager sends the token list back. And maybe we should just take a look at this really quickly. So this is the directive that it sends back, and really I'm just I'm sending back a new token list data, and I give it the correlation token that just came in, and the request token. I create a page token, a next page token, and I just give it the list ID, which comes back from the initial directive. And in this case, the list ID is just the ID of the library. And then I give it a list of items, which came in, um, if you looking back over here, the list of items is just the next set of items that that needs to be displayed in the APL document. I hope I've explained that decently. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I'm sure